Hey students, welcome to the Chapter 2 review for The Great Gatsby. Let's go ahead and get started. So, halfway between West Egg and New York City sprawls the desolate plain, a gray valley where New York's ashes are dumped. The men who live here work at shoveling up ashes. Overhead, two huge blue spectacle-rimmed eyes, the last vestige of an advertising gimmick by a long-vanished eye doctor store, stare down from an enormous sign. These unblinking eyes, the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, watch over everything that happens in the Valley of Ashes. So you guys will actually do an activity in which you analyze the Valley of Ashes because it's a super symbolic place in the novel. And so this visual should help you kind of see what the Valley of Ashes look like. So first off, when students read the beginning of chapter 2, they get a little confused about the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg because they think it's a real person. And what it actually is a billboard with glasses and eyes. And it's a billboard advertising an eye doctor, and the eye doctor is no longer there. So it's an old billboard, it's dilapidated, it's falling apart. And so this billboard, the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, look over the Valley of Ashes. And the Valley of Ashes is really striking because just in the last chapter, chapter 1, we are getting descriptions of East Egg with the bright white mansions and green lawns and Gatsby's huge Gothic mansion. And now we have the complete opposite, the Valley of Ashes, where it's gray and dusty and ultimately very impoverished. And so we have these two very contrasting scenes right in a row. And so I want you to think about what might the Valley of Ashes symbolize. So what does the Valley of Ashes symbolize? I'm not going to tell you because we're going to do an activity specifically on that. And also, what do you believe T.J. Eckelberg might symbolize within the Valley of Ashes? It's actually quite important. All right, so let's keep moving on. The commuter train that runs between West Egg and New York passes through the valley, making several stops along the way. One day, as Nick and Tom are riding the train into the city, Tom forces Nick to follow him out of the train at one of these stops. Tom leads Nick to George Wilson's garage, which sits on the edge of the Valley of Ashes. Tom's lover, Myrtle, is Wilson's wife. Uh-oh. Wilson is a lifeless yet handsome man, colored gray by the ashes in the air. In contrast, Myrtle has a kind of desperate vitality. She strikes Nick as sensuous despite her stocky figure. Tom taunts Wilson and then orders Myrtle to follow him to the train. Tom takes Nick and Myrtle to New York City, to the Morningside Heights apartment he keeps for his affair. Here they have an impromptu party with Myrtle's sister Catherine and a couple named McKee. Catherine has bright red hair, wears a great deal of makeup, and tells Nick that she has heard about Jay Gatsby, or has heard that Jay Gatsby is the nephew or cousin of the Kaiser Wilhelm, the ruler of Germany during World War I. The McKees, who live downstairs, are a horrid couple. Mr. McKee is pale and feminine, and Mrs. McKee is shrill. The group proceeds to drink excessively. Nick claims that he got drunk for only the second time in his life at this party. And so if you want to see the scene that's being referenced here, there's a link that you can go to in the presentation version of this video. But let's kind of focus in on this. So in the Valley of Ashes, Nick and Tom are on the are they on the train? Yeah, they're on the train, and they stop, and Tom forces Nick, like physically forces him off the train, and they go to Wilson's shop. Wilson owns an auto mechanic shop. And so Tom is at the shop under the guise of the idea that he wants to sell Wilson his car. But that's not actually why Tom is there. Instead, Tom is there because he's having an affair with Wilson's wife, Myrtle. And so Myrtle comes downstairs. She's super rude to her husband, pretty cruel to him. And they essentially sneak off behind his back, and they go into New York, have a big party. We meet Myrtle's sister, Catherine, who gossips about Gatsby. And Nick is along for the ride the entire time. And so this might remind us of the first 2 pages of the novel where Nick says that he reserves all of his judgments. So Tom's doing some pretty crummy things here, as is Myrtle doing some pretty crummy things here. And it seems that most of the characters in this scene, other than George Wilson, are pretty immoral. And yet Nick goes along with it. He doesn't judge them. And so we have to consider whether we agree or disagree with Nick's actions here. Is it a good thing that he's keeping an open mind and not judging these people? Or should he have put his foot down and said, you know what, this just doesn't seem right? And so you have to decide whether you think Nick is being reliable or unreliable here. And so there we go. Let's keep going. So far, what various aspects of Tom's personality make us not like him? There's so many aspects. We've kind of already gone over this. You can count the ways that Tom is just an unlikable human being. So the ostentatious behavior and conversations of the others at the party repulse Nick, and he tries to leave. At the same time, he finds himself fascinated by the lurid spectacle of the group. Myrtle grows louder and more obnoxious the more she drinks, and shortly after Tom gives her a new puppy as a gift, she begins to talk about Daisy. Tom sternly warns her never to mention his wife. Myrtle angrily says that she will talk about whatever she chooses and begins chanting Daisy's name. Tom responds by breaking her nose, bringing the party to an abrupt halt. Nick leaves drunkenly with Mr. McGee and ends up taking the 4 a.m. train back to Long Island. And so in this scene, they're having a party. Everyone's getting excessively drunk and things are getting out of hand. And the things that they're talking about is largely gossip and kind of like untrue and are really kind of like self-absorbed. And so we're supposed to kind of perceive this party as not a good thing. And Nick is repulsed by it, where he recognizes that the people he's hanging out with don't seem like very good people. But he's also kind of having fun. And so he stays. And ultimately the party ends where Tom and Myrtle get in a fight over Daisy, and Tom punches Myrtle in the face and breaks her nose. And so consider why Tom would punch Myrtle in the face for saying Daisy's name. What does this suggest about the way that Tom feels about his marriage? And ultimately, what does it suggest about how Tom feels about Myrtle? So keep that in mind. So why does Tom strike Myrtle in the face? Because she says, Daisy, Daisy, Daisy. And this suggests that Tom might still be very invested in his marriage. If he's defending his wife in this scene and doesn't want to hear his mistress say his wife's name, that suggests that he still has feelings for Daisy. It also suggests that there's no way that he's ever going to leave Daisy for Myrtle, which Myrtle probably has fantasies that he might. And what might this suggest about Tom's feelings? We just went over that. All right. And that's it. Hey, we're at the end. So that's the end of chapter 2. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. You can G-chat me, you can email me. You can also ask at office hours. All right. Or during class. All right. I'll talk to you later. Bye.